I can hear you at the door.
Open the door. It's the sheriff's office.
So what happened?
Nothing. We were just hanging out. We watched TV, and that's it.
But everybody was yelling and screaming. You got neighbors over here, and people don't even live here saying that she was screaming at the top of her lungs. Something was going on.
Everyone's fine. I mean, I get it.
Shortly before 6 p.m. one evening in October of 2023, police in Coral Springs, Florida, responded to multiple calls about a shooting at a local residence. A neighbor had been approached by one of the home's residents, who said that her son, 32-year-old Paul Henry DiGiacinto, had shot his girlfriend, Kyla AKA, and his father. Knowing the shooter was still inside, SWAT team members surrounded the property. Roughly an hour later, DiGiacinto's father managed to flee the residence. He told police that his son had tried smothering him to death with a pillow and that he had survived by playing dead. Following a brief struggle, law enforcement took DiGiacinto into custody. AKA died from her injuries, but DiGiacinto's father survived. After being taken to the hospital for treatment to his wounds, he told investigators that his son had tried flushing the entire household's cell phones down the toilet to prevent them from calling for help. DiGiacinto was charged with 1 count each of premeditated murder, premeditated attempted murder, and resisting arrest with violence. Roughly a month before AKA's murder, deputies had responded to the family's home after receiving a 911 call from a neighbor who expressed a concern that a woman was in danger. The caller described hearing a female screaming for help from inside the unit.
Help me, bloody murder, basically.
They opened the door and
opened the door and then she got back in, closed the door, and you hear tons of stuff screaming.
Knocking around. Sounds like there's a struggle going on inside, basically.
Struggle going on.
Over there?
Yes.
Yeah.
And saying that she wanted to leave the person she was arguing with. She also accused the other party of being a methamphetamine dealer, and the neighbor could hear glass breaking and furniture being thrown. According to records, the responding deputies banged on the door and could hear noise coming from inside, but nobody answered.
Open the door. It's the sheriff's office.
All right, due to exigent circumstances. What's 10 for? Due to exigent circumstances, if we have to go ahead and break the door down or get someone with the key to open the door, we will. We just need to find out if everybody's okay.
They forced their way inside and discovered that someone had rigged the door to try preventing them from entering. But when they interviewed DiGiacinto and AKA, both parties supposedly appeared to be physically and emotionally okay.
Downstairs.
We banged pretty hard.
So why you shaking? You just came out of nowhere.
What's going on?
Nothing at all. I promise you, nothing at all. I'm not pressing charges. Nothing at all.
Why would you not press charges?
I don't even know how to say
would you
the
not press
lingo
charges?
of the cops thing, but
Why
like,
would you not press charges? About what? If you said you wouldn't press charges, what would you not press
I
charges?
mean, I just said that to just because I don't know what's going on. Nothing's going on.
What's your name again? Paul. All right, Deputy Allen, bro. Look, situation didn't even have to go this far.
Well, I don't know what's talking about.
I get it.
I don't know what's
You're
going
shaking like it's like.
on. Yeah, because who wouldn't?
Not only that, you got scratches all over you and stuff like that. What's going on? Talk to me.
I have no idea what's going on.
You tell it exactly.
AKA declined law enforcement's offers of help and was advised to get her yelling under control in order to avoid alarming the neighbors. Community members later told Local 10 News that they suspected DiGiacinto of forcing AKA to act like everything was fine and lie to police about the situation. Records show that the murder case against DiGiacinto is ongoing. Number 17, Colt Gray.
I don't know anything about him saying shit like that, and I'm gonna be mad as hell if he did. And then all the guns will go away, and they won't be accessible. Say something about school shooting?
In early September of 2024, 9th grader Colt Gray opened fire on students and staff at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia, with a semi-automatic AR-style rifle, killing 4 and injuring at least 9 others. Included among the deceased victims were 2 teachers, 39-year-old Richard Aspinwall and 53-year-old Christina Irami, and 2 students, Mason Schermerhorn and Christian Angulo. Gray faces 55 charges, including 4 counts of murder, 4 counts of felony murder, 4 counts of aggravated battery, 25 counts of aggravated assault, and more. Authorities are also placing blame on his father, Colin Gray, who stands accused of 29 charges, including second-degree murder, cruelty to children, involuntary manslaughter, and reckless conduct. In May of 2023, more than a year before the shooting, Investigators had paid a visit to the Grays' home after receiving a tip from the FBI claiming that Colt had threatened to commit a school shooting. In body cam footage of law enforcement's conversation with the elder Gray, he could be heard admitting that there were unsecured guns in the house. He vowed to place all the household's guns under lock and key if the claims about the threats proved credible. Additionally, Collins said that he had spoken with Colt at length about school shootings and whether the team was getting picked on at school. But as we now all unfortunately know, Colin did not make his guns inaccessible to his son, and he's now being held criminally responsible for this failure. Further investigation revealed that Colt had created a shrine to previous school shooters in his bedroom. Colin said he had noticed new pictures on his son's wall and asked about who the individuals were, apparently unaware that the individuals in the photos had committed acts of mass violence. While prosecutors are blaming Colt Gray's father for enabling the shooting to happen, others have criticized law enforcement for failing to investigate Colt's alleged threats on a deeper level. Many agree either way that there were numerous missed opportunities to possibly prevent the shooting entirely. Number 16. Daryl Peterson. In April of 2020, 33-year-old dental nurse Louise Aitkinson was brutally murdered at the hands of her partner, Daryl Peterson, who strangled her and slashed her throat at their home in the Scottish town of East Kilbride. She had recently moved into the residence after being abused by her previous partner. Unaware that Peterson had a documented history of violence against women, 5 weeks before Aitkinson's death, an officer involved in Peterson's supervision for past crimes sought permission to warn the unsuspecting woman about her partner's past, but Peterson was inaccurately classified as a low-risk offender, and Aitkinson's contact information was never entered into the proper database. Consequently, no one warned Aitkinson that she was in danger, even after she called the police during an argument with Peterson on the day of her murder. Officers removed Peterson from the home and he returned with a knife and killed her less than an hour later. Within days of Aitkinson's death, the police admitted that they had failed to properly notify her about Peterson's past and apologized to her family. A subsequent investigation found that Aitkinson might still be alive today if she had been warned, which would have given her an opportunity to avoid Peterson and protect herself. Peterson admitted to killing Aitkinson, and in early 2021 he was convicted of murder and sentenced to 18 years in prison. Number 15. Camila Ahmed. In March of 2021, 19-year-old Ty O'Donnell was found stabbed to death at his home in Croydon, South London. His girlfriend, 22-year-old Camila Ahmed, had plunged a knife into his body 4 times and then left him to die. It took about a half hour for him to bleed to death, and he likely would have survived if emergency responders had been called to the scene in a timely fashion, and Ahmed had taken the time to clean up the crime scene and move her boyfriend's body, but she failed to alert the authorities to his dire need for medical attention. By the time help arrived, O'Donnell had been dead for around 12 hours, and it was far too late to save him. Ahmed claimed that she had acted in self-defense and that she was the victim, but she had a troubling history of domestic abuse and other crimes. Her record consisted of 11 previous convictions, including grievous bodily harm for stabbing a previous boyfriend in 2015, as well as robbery, assault and battery. She had served 4 years in a young offenders institution for her previous offenses and was still on probation when she killed her boyfriend. O'Donnell had told his mother Stacey about Ahmed's abuse, including her tendency to kick off over minor issues. On one occasion, Ahmed had smashed his window with a brick. Another time she bit him in the neck, leaving visible marks, but O'Donnell felt too ashamed to seek help from the police. He was embarrassed to admit that his petite girlfriend, who only stood as high as his chest, was abusing him and putting him in danger. Stacey later told the Sunday Times that she could tell her son was in distress, but she mistakenly assumed that the dysfunction between Ty and Ahmed was just an average toxic relationship. In 2023, Ahmed was convicted of O'Donnell's murder and sentenced to life, with a minimum of 23 years. Number 14. Emanuel Lopez. 20-year-old Emanuel Lopez had a troubling history of crime and violence when he was accused of killing a Weymouth, Massachusetts police officer and an elderly woman in July of 2018. 42-year-old Officer Michael Chesner was responding to a report of an erratic driver on a Sunday morning when he saw a suspect later identified as Lopez, vandalizing a home. He approached with his gun drawn and tried to arrest Lopez, who reportedly bludgeoned him in the head with a rock, then grabbed the officer's gun and shot him multiple times in the head and chest. The suspect fired at least 3 more shots before he was taken into custody, fatally striking 77-year-old Vera Adams with a stray bullet as she sat in the sunroom of her nearby home. Police finally apprehended Lopez after shooting him in the leg. He was taken to the hospital, where he received treatment to his wound before being booked into jail on 2 counts of murder. Shortly after the double homicide, the accused killer's mother told NBC Boston that she had recently obtained a restraining order against her son, who she said suffers from severe mental health issues. She claimed she had recently tried getting help for Lopez, who refused to take his medication, and said she was heartbroken and extremely sorry for the deaths he's accused of causing. A former classmate spoke with 7 News Boston about Lopez, stating that ups and downs were huge with him, and if something went wrong, he wasn't the type of person I wanted to be around, and too many things started to go wrong. A mistrial was declared in 2023 after the jury failed to agree on whether Lopez was guilty due to his history of mental illness. The case was retried in 2024 and Lopez was found guilty of both murders. He received 2 life sentences, with the possibility of parole starting when he's 60 years old. Number 13. Nicholas Metson. Desperate to escape her abusive husband after he killed her beloved pets, to punish her, 26-year-old Holly Bramley repeatedly begged the police in the English city of Lincoln for help. On one occasion, 28-year-old Nicholas Metson had put Bramley's hamsters in a blender and a microwave. Another time, he ran the couple's washing machine with his wife's puppy inside. By the time Bramley found the dog, he was dead. By the time Bramley vanished in March of 2023, concerned friends had also contacted law enforcement due to the volatile nature of the couple's marriage. Over a week later, a civilian discovered some of the young woman's dismembered remains along the River Witham in Bassingham. Bramley had been stabbed 4 times and cut up into more than 200 pieces. Metson initially denied any involvement in the murder, but had been on the suspect list since before the discovery of Bramley's body due to his unusual and suspicious behavior during the investigation into her disappearance. When police visited the couple's flat in search of Bramley, Metson claimed she had left the residence with 2 members of a mental health crisis team. While there, officers noticed an overwhelming aroma of bleach, which only caused their suspicions against Metson to grow. Further investigation, including a search of his phone, revealed even more incriminating evidence, including messages to his friend Joshua Hancock, who had helped dispose of Bramley's remains. As his trial approached in 2024, Metson changed his plea to guilty. He was sentenced to life with a minimum of 19 years. Number 12. Felipe Magal. When a fight broke out between strangers at an Indianapolis tavern late one night in October 2024, Perry Banks and several other bystanders intervened in an attempt to de-escalate the situation. One of the men involved in the dispute, identified by police as 33-year-old Felipe Magal, got into his SUV and plowed into a crowd of people, killing Banks. Just a week earlier, Magal had been caught on camera threatening and shooting a motorist during an unrelated altercation on the city's south side. According to police, Magal chased the victim into the parking lot of a business with a gun and shot him in the elbow after he tried acting as a peacekeeper during a disagreement between the suspect and another man. The victim drove himself to the hospital and survived his injuries. In that case, Magal was charged with battery and criminal recklessness. At the time, he also had a pending criminal case consisting of intimidation, illegal entry, and drug charges. The judge initially set bond at $100,000, but the amount was soon lowered to just $15,000, enabling Magal to secure his release from jail as he awaited trial. Just 2 days later, he was arrested for killing Banks. Speaking with Fox 59, Indianapolis Fraternal Order of Police President Rick Snyder described the current criminal justice system as a revolving door that gives those accused of violent crimes a get-out-of-jail-free card. Magal is currently being held without bail, but Snyder and many others believe that he should have never been free to kill in the first place. Number 11. Peter Lolo Brigido. In July of 2021, police in Loudoun County, Virginia, arrested Peter L Brigido for beating and strangling his wife, 44-year-old Regina Redmond L Brigido, in a brutal domestic violence attack. He was released on an ankle monitor after posing a $5,000 unsecured bond and was ordered to have no contact with his wife. Less than a week later, L Brigido called 911 and confessed to killing Regina, who was found beaten and unconscious in the hallway of her Arcola home with a bloody hammer lying nearby. She was rushed to the hospital, where she succumbed to her injuries a week later. Following Regina's death, authorities charged L Brigido with first-degree murder, 2 counts of malicious abduction, 2 counts of assault and battery on a family member, and violating a protective order. The slain woman's mother, Melanie Cromwell, criticized the criminal justice system for failing to protect her daughter from L Brigido, who had a documented history of abusing his wife. Speaking with NBC4 Washington, Cromwell cited the horrifying tragedy as an example of why she believes criminal justice reform needs to be scaled back. In June of 2024, L Brigido pleaded guilty to all 7 counts. He was sentenced to 85 years in prison, with all but 42 years suspended, which effectively amounts to a life sentence for the 52-year-old. He claimed he was remorseful for his actions, describing himself as a good person who did a bad thing, while the prosecutor admonished the systemic shortcomings which allowed him to be free to kill Regina in the first place. Number 10. Mark Ducket. During the summer of 2019, police responded to a report of shots fired in the typically quiet Hamilton, Ontario suburb of Mountain. Officers arrived at a local residence shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning and found 28-year-old Nico Sienna suffering from multiple bullet wounds. He had been shot by his severely mental ill neighbor, 26-year-old Mark Ducket, with whom he had been entangled in a long-standing dispute. Sienna had no criminal record and was known as a peaceful individual who generally got along with people. But Ducket, who suffered from untreated schizophrenia, became convinced that Nico and his family were out to get him. On the night of the murder, he waited until Sienna and his other household members were sound asleep, then broke into their house and opened fire on the victim. Less than 4 hours prior to the shooting, police had responded to the home over concerns about Duckett's behavior. Officers gave Ducket a verbal warning and left, leaving him free to act on his violent plans. After shooting Sienna, he fled the scene. A short while later, he drove to a local police station and surrendered. Despite being mentally ill, Ducket had been allowed to legally buy a gun prior to Sienna's murder, marking the first of numerous systemic failures that the victim's family blamed for his death. To add insult to injury, the accused killer pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder on the basis of mental illness and was found not criminally responsible, or NCR, for his actions. He was ordered to undergo inpatient psychiatric treatment with annual reviews to determine whether he's suitable for release, leaving the Sienna family feeling failed by their country's criminal justice system. Number 9. Bruce Wayne Gerard. In December 2023, 25-year-old Tanisha Richards filed a report against her alleged stalker, 43-year-old Bruce Wayne Gerard, with the Houston police. In the complaint, she noted that Gerard had recently gotten out of jail and was sending her threatening text messages. She had also received dozens of unwanted phone calls from Gerard, who wrote in several of his messages that he planned to physically harm Richards. According to records, Richards told police that she was afraid Gerard would find out where she lived. She feared for her life, and with good reason. As the tragic outcome of the situation proves, 6 months after Richards complained about Gerard to law enforcement, a neighbor called 911 and reported a disturbance at her condo. Responding officers found her dead from a gunshot wound inside her residence. Surveillance footage reportedly showed Gerard pacing outside the slain woman's unit and repeatedly ringing the doorbell for 12 minutes before Richards cracked the door open. The alleged assailant forced his way inside and shut the door. Less than 5 minutes later, he was seen exiting the condo. While searching Gerard's car, investigators found handwritten plans to track Richards' location through her phone records and social security number. He made his intentions clear with a written statement which read, "I will find Tanisha Richards." Police also found the victim's tax returns and a photo of Richards with another ominous handwritten statement on it. It's unclear how the two knew each other. Gerard is currently being held without bond at the Harris County Jail on a capital murder charge. Records show that the authorities have also moved to revoke his parole in a previous case. Number 8. Corey Ramos. 30-year-old Corey Ramos already had numerous domestic violence convictions on his record when he murdered the mother of his young son, 40-year-old Jennifer Brailsford, in October of 2020. By the time Brailsford was found strangled and slashed to death in her Bridgeport, Connecticut apartment, Ramos had fled the scene. At the time, the victim had 2 protective orders in place banning Ramos from contacting her. And according to her family, she had endured years of abuse at her killer's hands. When police apprehended Ramos at the Canadian border the following day, he reportedly admitted to killing Brailsford during an argument. He told interrogators that he'd made the decision to murder his estranged girlfriend when she opened the door and tried screaming to the neighbors for help in an attempt to let them know that he had violated the protective orders. In January of 2024, Ramos pleaded guilty to murder and violating a protective order. He tried to recant his pleas during his sentencing hearing, but the judge denied the request to move forward with the proceeding, imposing a 35-year prison term. Number 7. Aaron Glee Jr. Late one night in 2010, 39-year-old Aaron Glee Jr. entered his ex-girlfriend's West Palm Beach, Florida home without her permission. He left at the woman's urging, and she called the police, shaken but unaware that she had just crossed paths with her future killer. A decade later, in June of 2020, investigators traced the cell phone of a missing 75-year-old woman named Victoria Sims to a dilapidated home in Tallahassee, where Glee lived as a squatter. While searching a wooded area near the residence, police found the bodies of Sims and another missing woman, 19-year-old college student and Black Lives Matter activist Oluwatoyin Salau. Sims had vanished 5 days earlier, and Salau had been missing for about a week, which meant that they had both been murdered within days of one another. By the time the women's remains were discovered, 49-year-old Glee had fled the area on a Greyhound bus in blood-stained jeans. Law enforcement tracked him down in Orlando and arrested him for the murders, along with kidnapping and assault charges. Glee's history of abusing women and his criminal record both dated back decades. In the days leading up to the murders, he was arrested twice, once for battery following a fight with another man at a bus stop, and the following day on an aggravated assault charge for attacking a woman who rejected his advances. He quickly bonded out of jail and met the first of his murder victims, Salau, less than a week later. Following his arrest, Glee confessed to luring Salau to his house after meeting her on the street and learning that she had nowhere to go. He called Sims, who had given him food in the past, and persuaded her to give them a ride to the decrepit home. In June of 2023, Glee pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and kidnapping in exchange for being spared the death penalty. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Number 6. Marshall Raburn. 70-year-old Peggy Beasley was going about her normal nighttime routine at her St. Francisville, Louisiana home in September 2021 when her estranged husband, Marshall Raburn, snuck into the residence and pointed a gun at her. A neighbor rushed over and begged Raburn to put the gun down, but he refused. He shot the neighbor, who was attempting to block Beasley, and the bullet traveled through their body and into Beasley. The neighbor survived, but Beasley died from her injuries. By the time police arrived at the scene, Raburn was also dead. Just weeks earlier, Raburn had been arrested for drugging and assaulting Beasley, who had discovered evidence that her husband was violating her while she was unconscious. Beasley promptly filed for divorce, and Raburn was released after posting a $100,000 bond. He was required to wear a GPS ankle monitor, which the authorities claimed was being monitored 24/7, and the device was supposedly programmed to alert law enforcement if he went within 500 feet of Beasley's residence. Yet he somehow managed to go unnoticed by those in charge of his supervision when he traveled 41 miles to his estranged wife's house and killed her. In fact, Raburn went into the exclusion zone surrounding Beasley's property multiple times in the weeks leading up to her murder. Law enforcement blamed the monitoring company for failing to notify them that he was breaching his movement restrictions, but this is just one of many examples of authorities failing to properly supervise GPS monitors across the United States. Cases like this have prompted lawmakers to campaign for stronger oversight laws in recent years. in hopes that tightened regulations will lead to fewer preventable tragedies. Number 5. Ahmed Al Alisa. Shortly after 2:30 p.m. one afternoon in March of 2021, 21-year-old Ahmed Al Alisa entered the parking lot of a King Soopers grocery store in Boulder, Colorado's Table Mesa neighborhood and opened fire on innocent civilians. Donning a tactical vest and armed with 2 semi-automatic handguns, he went to the supermarket with one specific goal in mind: to commit as much carnage as possible. Alisa continued shooting as he entered the store, killing 10 people in total by the time the shooting was over. Included among the victims was police officer Eric Torley, who was shot while running toward the gunfire in a heroic attempt to stop the massacre. The gunman continued firing at officers, resulting in a 20-minute shootout with law enforcement. He finally surrendered after being shot in the thigh and was charged with dozens of felonies, including 10 counts of first-degree murder, 38 counts of attempted murder, 10 counts of using a high-capacity magazine, and 1 count of first-degree assault. In the massacre's aftermath, many were left wondering if there were missed opportunities to stop Alisa from acting on his murderous desires. Perhaps not surprisingly, the mass shooting reawakened age-old debates among Americans about whether lax gun laws are to blame for these types of tragedies. Records showed that Alisa passed a background check to buy the guns he used in the shooting, despite having a third-degree assault conviction on his record, which wasn't held against him due to its misdemeanor status and maximum prison term of less than 24 months. Under federal gun laws, a prior conviction of this nature would not have prohibited him from buying a firearm. Alisa pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, and his defense attorneys argued that he was incompetent to proceed to trial. After undergoing mental health treatment for more than 18 months, the court determined that his competency had been restored and the case finally continued. In September of 2024, a jury found Alisa guilty on nearly all counts, including all 10 murders and 38 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms plus 1,334 years. Number 4. DAngelo Martin. Over a roughly 18-month period starting in February of 2018, 4 women in their 50s were found murdered inside abandoned houses throughout downtown Detroit, shaking the community to its core. Police denied rumors that there was a serial killer on the loose, but they were wrong. A 38-year-old local resident named DAngelo Kenneth Martin was responsible for the killings, the first among them being the murder of 57-year-old Annetta Nelson. Police initially arrested the homeless man who discovered Nelson's body, but he was freed less than a week later after investigators found evidence proving his innocence. A little over a year later, Martin lured 52-year-old Nancy Harrison into a vacant house and bludgeoned her to death after they used drugs together. The decomposing body of his third victim, 52-year-old Trevisine Ellis, was found 2 months later in May of 2019. In early June of that year, Martin's fourth and final murder victim, 55-year-old Tamara Jones, was found beaten to death. Martin was linked to the murders through DNA, but these crimes could have been prevented if it weren't for a series of missteps by law enforcement, which allowed him to walk free despite a troubling criminal history. Prior to the murders, Martin had assaulted multiple women and had been connected to at least one of these crimes through DNA, while evidence in at least one other assault case sat in a warehouse, untested, for years. Additionally, Martin was repeatedly arrested between the 4 murders for other offenses, including violent acts against women, but he was turned loose time and time again, enabling the serial killer to continue committing preventable crimes. In May of 2019, prior to claiming his 4th murder victim, Martin attacked a 26-year-old woman he met at a drug den. The victim took him up on his offer to join him back at his residence, where Martin assaulted her and stabbed her in the neck. She fought back, attracting the attention of Martin's grandmother, who also lived at the residence, and called the police. By the time police arrived, Martin had fled. He was placed on a wanted list and was captured about a month later at a Detroit bus stop. Following his arrest, he was linked to the 4 murders through DNA. Just days before he was scheduled to go to trial in 2022, Martin pleaded guilty to all 4 murders, as well as 2 assaults. He was sentenced to 45 to 70 years in prison, which will likely keep him behind bars for the rest of his life. Number 3. Jared Loughner. In January 2011, a 22-year-old unemployed dropout named Jared Lee Loughner opened fire on strangers at a political gathering outside a Tucson, Arizona supermarket with a stolen Glock handgun. He specifically targeted the event where U.S. Representative Gabby Giffords was holding a meeting with her constituents after developing an obsessive and delusional hatred toward the Congresswoman. 6 people were killed in the massacre, including one of Giffords' staff members, Gabe Zimmerman, and Chief U.S. District Court Judge John Roll. 13 others were injured, including Gifford and a man who bravely fought to subdue Loughner. Those who knew Loughner said that his personality had undergone a sea change in recent years. He harbored anarchist sentiments, had a history of drug and alcohol abuse, and clearly suffered from untreated mental illness. Loughner was also seemingly incapable of holding a job, had been rejected by the U.S. military, and was suspended from college due to his bizarre and disruptive behavior. Loughner had 2 minor offenses on his record at the time of the shooting, including charges for drug paraphernalia and defacing a street sign. Prior to the massacre, he became fixated on conspiracy theories, revolving mainly around his mistrust toward the government. He disapproved of women being in positions of leadership and particularly hated Giffords, who he viewed as dishonest and fake. Throughout his court proceedings, Loughner was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He resisted treatment but was forcibly medicated with antipsychotic injections. In 2012, he pleaded guilty to 6 counts of murder and 13 counts of attempted murder in federal court. He was sentenced to life without parole and is serving his sentence at a medical prison in Minnesota. Number 2. Ted Bundy. American serial killer Ted Bundy murdered at least 30 women in 7 U.S. states throughout the 1970s. His true number of victims is thought to be higher and may never be known. Bundy also assaulted an unknown number of women. By day, Bundy was a charming, intelligent, and well-liked college student who completed his undergraduate degree in Washington State before moving to Utah for law school. His confident nature and likable personality were precisely what enabled him to evade suspicion while getting away with his crimes, but there were signs that he was dangerous, which arguably went overlooked. Bundy was first arrested in 1975 after being pulled over in Granger, Utah, with an array of suspicious items in his car, including a ski mask, a crowbar, a mask made from pantyhose, handcuffs, trash bags, rope, an ice pick, and more. The deputy who enacted the traffic stop suspected Bundy of being involved in a kidnapping that had been carried out with similar items, but there wasn't enough evidence to detain him and he walked free without charges. Following this initial arrest, however, investigators' suspicions against Bundy grew, leading to the discovery of his connections to more crimes. In 1976, Bundy was found guilty of that very kidnapping and sentenced to 15 years in prison. He escaped custody twice in 1977 and managed to throw pursuing members of law enforcement off his trail long enough to commit several more murders before finally being caught in Florida. Between 1979 and 1980, Bundy was convicted of 3 murders in the Sunshine State. He was sentenced to death and met his fate in the electric chair in January of 1989. Number 1. Gabby Patito and Brian Laundrie.
His names?
Gabby.
Gabby, Brian, okay. What's going on? How come you're crying?
I didn't get overtly physical. I was just trying to keep her away and not get hit. And then I got really loud and that's probably drew everyone's attention where I was going. Oh, okay.
Yeah, what's that from?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just some days I have really bad OCD and I was just cleaning.
In late 2021, headlines around the world reported on the tragic disappearance of 22-year-old Gabby Patito, who vanished while traveling across the U.S. in a van with her boyfriend, Brian Laundrie. Just days before she went missing, police had pulled the couple over in Utah in response to a complaint about a man slapping a woman. Body cam footage showed Patito in a visibly distressed state. She admitted that she and Laundrie had hit each other during an argument.
I've decided I am not going to cite you for domestic violence battery, okay? It was only going to be a Class B misdemeanor. However, the domestic violence portion of it enhances it. Makes life a major pain in the butt, especially you're 22, right?
And the couple agreed to separate for the night, but told officers that they did not want to press charges against each other.
Take some time to yourselves. You guys both have the exact same story as to what led up to the incident.
Petito's remains were found weeks later at Bridger-Teton National Forest in Wyoming. She had been strangled to death, and by then, Laundrie had also vanished after briefly returning to Florida to visit his family, sparking a nationwide manhunt. Although Laundrie wasn't an official suspect in Gabby's murder, all signs pointed toward him being responsible for her death, with many wondering if the police who stopped the couple in Utah had overlooked any red flags that should have signaled a need for heightened action. Investigators undoubtedly wanted to learn more from Laundrie regarding the circumstances leading up to Petito's disappearance and death, but they failed to find him alive. A month after Petito was found murdered, Laundrie's skeletal remains were located in a remote part of Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park. In early 2022, the FBI revealed that Laundrie had confessed to killing Petito in his diary, which was found near his remains. He also admitted to deceiving people into believing that Petito was still alive by sending text messages from her phone after he murdered her. Given these findings, the authorities officially concluded that Laundrie was the sole party responsible for Petito's death and that no one else was involved. Thanks for watching. Would you rather solve a cold case murder or uncover a massive government corruption scandal that affects the entire country you live in? Let us know in the comments section below and why.